From Wall Street to managing hundreds of millions in client money, Nick and I use our alphabet soup of credentials to discuss the investing and tax strategies that actually work. Oh, and we played Division I college football together, so strap in. This one hits hard. Let's go.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Life Goal Podcast. Today, Brett and I are going to be breaking down what we think is a core part of every American's retirement plan, which is the proper utilization of the 401k. Looking at the news here, there's been a lot of proposals and legislation coming down the pike with some changes to 401k plans in general, including alternative investments like private equity, crypto, plus a lot of ideas about penalty-free withdrawals for home down payments. So we're going to kind of just cover some best practices as to what's the best utilization of a 401k plan, and kind of discuss some of these potential changes that could be coming for your retirement plan. So let's look at kind of why this matters now. We've had in 2026, we've got new contribution limits that came out. We got new rules for catch-ups and, again, evolving policy under this administration. So let's look at the 2026 contribution limits. Just quickly hit these. In terms of employee deferral, your contributions annually set at $24,500. If you're above the age of 50, you get an additional $8,000, bringing your grand total to $32,500. And if you're between the ages of 60 and 63, you get the enhanced super catch-up of $11,250, bringing your overall plan limit contributions up to $72,000. So there's adequate room if you're coming up to retirement here to try to get a lot of that money put to work in the markets in that retirement plan. Looking at just some stats that came out from Empower and Fidelity, the big 401k plan sponsors that are out there, Americans have been doing a great job contributing to these plans. According to Vanguard, the average contribution rate from employee plus their employer match averaged nearly 12%. Fidelity's was a little bit higher at about 14%. So people are definitely taking advantage of these plans, and it's, in our opinion, is the right move to be doing. So just kind of some best practices we can think about when you're looking at how much I should be contributing to the plan. We always recommend making sure that you're going to be able to capture the full employee match. I think that's a crucial aspect. It's free money that you're being given that's going to be able to compound over time and can make a huge difference over the life of your working career. Going in, most companies are going to auto-enroll you into the plan, so you don't have to worry about that too much unless you work at a very small company. But just making sure that we automate our contributions and automate those annual increases to keep pace with inflation, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the question we get asked most from our clients and when they're looking at their 401k plans is about the asset allocation and the diversification within that. Brett, what's kind of your thoughts in terms of how folks should be putting money to work within those 401k plans?
Yeah, absolutely. Generally speaking, when we're chatting with all these different, clients and friends and family and everybody else that wants to talk about investments, I think there's a pretty broad-based misconception of how to utilize the investment lineup within a 401k. And generally speaking, just to put it all in one short sentence here, 100% into the target date is our recommendation. Now, obviously, everybody has unique scenarios, and we don't want to make blanket statements for compliance purposes. But generally speaking, these target dates are designed to act as a one-stop shop for the typical investor, and they are diversified in their own right. right? So a target date is actually a fund of funds. And whether it's managed by, whoever it may be Fidelity, maybe Vanguard, obviously there's, all the big T. Rowe Price, BlackRock, many of the big institutions have their target dates, and you'll find either one of those firms or a different firm inside of your 401k lineup. And it's an odd thought as an investor to put 100% of your 401k dollars into one fund and think that you're diversified. But these funds, these target dates are designed with the thought that you're putting 100% of your assets within the 401k into them, right? And they are properly diversified, and they are actively managed, and they are rebalanced. So they take everything out of the hands of the investor. And that is very, very powerful. And it allows you as the investor to look at it as infrequently as possible. And that's probably in your best interest, right? So it's an odd thought to say, hey, I'm going to put 100% of my money in one fund and I'm going to be diversified. But these things, again, you are going into a fund of funds, right? They may have 12 to 15 different funds under the hood of one target date. So if you're going to retire in approximately 2050, you pick the target date 2050, right? And you invest in it, and that target date strategy will get slightly more conservative as you get slightly closer to retirement, right? And along the way, it will keep you 100% invested, and it will not allow you to hurt yourself. So, even picking on me, right? Pick on me. My wife's a nurse practitioner. She obviously has somebody in her family who knows a thing or two about investments, or at least pretends to, as the CIO of an investment firm. Myself, her money's in a target date, right? We don't get cute. We just, go into the target date, buy every 2 weeks, and embrace it. And people will say that they want to customize it a little bit, and I can appreciate that. Hey, I want to own some S&P, or I want to own, a little bit more growth stocks, or I want to pick a couple funds that are in here, and I'm going to make it a little spicier. And that's cool, and that's, fine. The problem is it becomes a slippery slope. You start there, next thing you know, Liberation Day comes and tariff news breaks, and you decide, I've been actively managing this along the way. Now I'm going to cash. And we see people all the time where, they send over their 401k to do a rollover, or we're consulting them on their outside assets that are sitting in their 401k at work, and they're 50% in cash or 25% in cash. And that is not how you should be utilizing a 401k. These things are, if you go into the target date, or you're going to build a cocktail, a multi-asset portfolio built by yourself, run the thing fully invested, right? Be diversified, run it fully invested, stocks, bonds, non-US stocks, get everything in there, and bank on time as your friend and dollar cost averaging. You're buying every 2 weeks. So that's one of the biggest things that we see, and we don't blame people. It is an odd thought to say, hey, I'm going to put 100% of my 401k, which is likely a very large amount of money for anybody, right? It's relative for everybody, into one fund and think it's diversified. But that is the way they were designed. That is the way they're intended to be used. And we would encourage people to do that. So, Nick, are there any pitfalls that you've seen folks stumble into as it relates to the 401k?
I think the first one is the one you just hit on, is not utilizing those target date funds. And I think for some folks on that front, it's I don't want to have that much fixed income in my portfolio. You can just shift back into a different target date that's got a higher allocation to equities, if that's really what you want to do, if you're concerned about. And I think other pitfalls that folks are kind of falling into when it comes to using these plans is cashing out when they got a job change. Make sure that we're rolling that over into a qualified IRA or to your next employer, and then just making sure, again, those investment choices, you've got a consistent process. Again, simplify your life, make things easy on yourself, and just use those target dates. The biggest bonus that you're going to get, the biggest alpha add, is going to be that employer match and the pre-tax contributions that you're making to that. So I think numbers were something like 14% of Americans are maxing out their 401k. The numbers are high, so that's kind of to be expected. But that would be the biggest pitfall is that folks just aren't putting as much money as as they can comfortably into these qualified plans. I think that's something you want to make sure you're doing and taking advantage of.
Just real quick
you know-
on that, Nick,
Yeah.
if just real quick on that, if you're a young person that's coming in and you have student loans and you may have a mortgage and you may have other things that allow you to, or that don't allow you to potentially max it out. If it's borderline and you think you can make your life cash flow, start with maxing it out, right? Start with maxing it out. See how it goes. Like force yourself into a tight financial situation where, not incredibly tight, where you get yourself in trouble, where you're missing debt payments or whatever, but make it so you're having to stretch your dollar. And if you can do it, great, right? You can always dial it back. That is what we would encourage, right? Rather than starting with, hey, I'm going to do 10%, try to push it to the limit. And then if you can't do it, back it down. And then, with AI that's out there, whether it's ChatGPT or whatever your favorite platform is, go in there, take your salary, take whatever debt you have that's going on, whether it's student loans, mortgage, car, food bills, build yourself a little mini financial plan and just, throw it into the software and say, hey, can I afford to max this thing out? And if I do, how much is that going to leave me on a month-to-month basis? And see what it spits out. And if you think you can make it work, go ahead and max it out. And see where it takes you. And if you get to a situation where it's really, really tight at the end of the month, take it down a couple points, right? Take it down 2 or 3, 4%, whatever it may be. Leave yourself some wiggle room, but you will be very, very, very happy if you look back 10, 15 years from now and you see that, my goodness, I've got 200K potentially in the 401k at that point in time. You're going to be pumped and you're going to be way, way, way ahead, which is what we're trying to help people to listen to this podcast do, is get ahead and stay ahead.
Yeah, the longer that money is compounding and in the markets, the more you're going to have at the end of your retirement. Get invested early, and again, make sure you're contributing as much as you can be there. Yeah. So when making those contributions and kind of where you're going to be putting that money to work, most employers are going to offer you the choice between a Roth and a traditional 401k. Now, if you spend any amount of time on Instagram, Roths are all the rage. So let's just clarify and kind of break those down. A traditional is pre-tax contributions that reduces your taxable income today. You get deferred growth, tax-deferred growth. Withdrawals are going to be taxed as ordinary income in retirement. The Roth is made with after-tax contributions. There's no upfront deduction. Tax-free qualified growth for the money you have in there, and tax-free withdrawals. Now, I think a lot of people, when making that recommendation, kind of that Roth is the only way to go, are making some assumptions that make sense. I think they're really baking in the fact that taxes are going to go higher in the future, just based on what's going on here in the United States fiscally. It looks like we either have to cut spending by a lot, raise taxes, or some combination of both. But I think the certainty in which that they're making those assumptions doesn't quite add up. It's a very politically unpopular political campaign to run on, that I'm going to be raising taxes for folks. So, Brett, I think when you're looking at whether someone should be looking to contribute to a Roth or to a traditional 401k, what are some considerations they should make there?
When it comes to choosing whether to put your money into a Roth or a traditional 401k, the decision-making factor needs to be driven by the amount of money you're making, okay? If you're making, and this has to do with your married filing jointly, or if you're filing single. Obviously, we're looking at different tax codes, so you need to make an active decision that's customized to your personal financial situation. But generally speaking, if you're in a lower income level, it may make sense to go with the Roth, right, where you're paying taxes on those dollars today, and it's post-tax money that's going into the 401k. If you're in a middle or high income tax bracket, we struggle. We struggle, right? We really, really have a hard time making the numbers make sense. And we have financial planning software that helps us with this, and the numbers don't make sense, to be more direct. You got to go with the traditional option. You can't afford to pay the taxes up front. So what that ends up doing then is all your money goes into the 401k and it's not taxed. And you're going to worry about the taxes in the end. Why? Because you're likely in a much lower tax bracket in the end, because you're no longer going to be getting a salary. Another perk to potentially going with the Roth option when you're just out of, potentially out of college or just out of school, starting, newly into the workforce, is there is a one-time exception to pull money out of a Roth 401k or out of a Roth for a home purchase to utilize as the down payment. So that is a nice feature. And the reason why that option is there is because you've already paid the taxes on it. So, that is a scenario where it may make sense. And then also keep in mind, if you're on the cusp, right, you can split it. And think about it, if money is going into a 401k, a traditional 401k, it is being taken off your adjusted gross income. So it is going to lower your tax bracket. So the piece that's going into the Roth, you're getting taxed on it, but you're going to be in a slightly lower bracket than you would be if you put all of it into the Roth, because then it's going to drive up your adjusted gross income to the highest level because it's all being, captured. So these are the decisions that folks need to look at. Generally speaking, again, just to recap it, generally speaking, if you're brand new to the workforce, you can probably, and you're not making a whole heck of a lot of money, you can probably move forward with the Roth, and the, maybe the decision-making, the driver is, hey, if I need to utilize this for a one-time home purchase, my first home, that is the straw that tips us that direction. But if you're in the middle of your career or later in your career where you're making more money than you're going to be making in retirement when you don't have a salary, embrace the traditional, right? Put it in, do not get taxed on it. Worry about the taxes when we take it out a few decades from now. So high level, that's the advice we have. And obviously everybody should be customizing that to their personal situation and tax code.
Yep, absolutely. And I think a hybrid approach for a lot of folks does make sense. Working with an advisor to help maximize the contributions there and determine the strategy for what's the best approach makes sense. Tax diversification can be like portfolio diversification. You want to minimize the amount of money that you're giving Uncle Sam, and you want to be making sure that you're making those contributions in the smartest way possible given your circumstances. But I think looking at the rules around 401ks, they're always evolving. They're never static, and right now there's a lot of discussions being had in Washington D.C. And proposed legislation for changes to 401k plans. Everything including alternative investments being included as menu options, things like private equity, private credit, even cryptocurrencies. There's been some proposals here for house down payments and things like annuities being included in the plan. So we're going to talk about some of the opportunities, risks, and kind of ways to be thinking about these things as they continue to evolve. I think the first area we'll go to is alternative investments. It's something we talk about a lot here at Life Goal, and the role that they play within a portfolio. Brett, what are you thinking about alternative investments being included in the 401k plans?
Yeah, we like it. It's a return driver. It's a diversification benefit, right? Because alternative investments tend to have a low correlation to the public stock market. And we have seen it used successfully across the big pensions that are out there. As an example, maybe it's New York State or CalPERS, which is the California pension. You'll see a very, very large portion of those portfolios in private equity, right? Which is example maybe like a SpaceX is a company that would be considered as private equity, or private credit, private infrastructure, farmland, timber forest. You're seeing all these assets get utilized in the big pensions, and they haven't made it into the 401k system yet. And there's a bunch of different reasons why, but we do think that if done properly, it would work well for individual investors if it was put into a 401k. So I guess that begs the question, how would it be used properly, or how would it be designed properly? Back to the target date funds, right? So the target date funds, I know that we were recommending earlier as the initial idea that should be considered for anybody inside of a 401k is embracing the target date. If you took the private investments, whether it's private equity or private credit or private infrastructure, farmland, these type of investments, if you looked at them as a piece of a target date, they would then be managed by an institutional investor who fully understands the pros and cons of private investments as well as the liquidity. And they would highly likely do a very good job massaging those into portfolios, and utilizing the strengths and being able to avoid the weaknesses. So the primary weakness that comes with private investments is illiquidity. Okay. If we're buying something that is in the private landscape, it is illiquid, and it should be looked at as a buy and hold investment for a long period of time, multiple years, right? So if you were to say, hey, let's put a private equity fund in the 401k lineup, that as 100%, that line item in your 401k says, private equity fund by XYZ company, and you could put up to 100% of your money in there, or some fraction of it, but it's a standalone investment. It then needs liquidity guardrails, because you can't be putting the money into private equity and then 3 months later changing your mind and pulling the money back out, right? That money needs to go in, and it needs to be there for a long period of time so that the portfolio manager that's managing the private equity fund can take the cash that you invested in it, go put it to work, and have that, work for many years to maximize the results, right? That's the big deal with private investments is they need time to deliver the higher returns. And they have historically been able to do that. Even risk adjusted, they have outperformed the public markets over a long period of time. So that's why when we look at, whether it's private equity or one of the other asset classes, private credit, private infrastructure, if it's done within a target date, and a target date is an institutionally managed portfolio that is multi-asset, meaning it's got stocks, it's got bonds, it's got non-U.S. stocks. It's a diversified portfolio in its own right. You are then putting the allocation size and the liquidity constraints on the professional portfolio manager that manages the target date. And I could assure you that they have the education and background to be able to lead a successful results. Whereas if it's done in isolation, just a private equity fund or just a private credit fund, I do not think that the results will be great, because people will be potentially coming and going from the fund, and that is just a non-starter when it comes to investing in the space.
Yeah, and I think that's defeats the purpose of the role that we think these asset classes play in your portfolio. It shouldn't not be 100% allocation. It's got a role as a piece of that portfolio. And to your point, a 401k, a retirement account is kind of the perfect place, which is why you do see such a high allocation to these in pension funds. You've got a long runway till you're going to be drawing on this money. Something like private equity is kind of a perfect fit for that. And again, from a capital appreciation standpoint, it's been a great asset class to own over time. You go back to 2004, versus just publicly the S&P 500. Private equity has almost doubled the returns over that 20-year time period. So I think for Americans, I think that in the study that Fidelity had pulled up earlier, said that I think 58% of plan participants are concerned that they're not going to have enough to retire comfortably. This is an asset class within the alternative space that addresses that capital appreciation side of things. I think one of I think one of the issues when folks are looking at this alternative is the inclusion of crypto into the 401k space. We've obviously seen some tremendous volatility out of Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies here over the last couple of weeks. What would be your recommendation to the administration or to anyone who was thinking about putting crypto into their 401k plans here?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I'm not there on crypto at this point in time as it relates to putting it into a 401k. What we need to do is go back to the core benefit of a 401k program, right? It's not there to be a speculative asset. It's there to be a long-term compounder. And we have to understand also, that the individual that is investing in the 401k, they need guardrails put on them, right? I can pick on myself. If if I was a 23-year-old, which I was at one point in time, obviously, and I was given, my first $10,000 or $15,000 that was in my 401k, and I was left on my own to allocate it, and I had options between crypto, private equity, and the stock market. I probably would be all huddled into one corner or another, and I'd probably be trying to time the market, and I'd be hopping around. And I can tell you, with a couple decades experience investing under my belt, that is not a recipe for success. And as boring as the darn target date sounds, and I would like to think that I'm not the most boring person on the planet. I'm embracing the damn boring. Maybe that just means I'm getting old. But embrace institutional quality assets, right? Stocks that are publicly traded. Private equity done with institutional quality manager that understands the space. Private real estate, bonds, non-U.S. stocks. This stuff has been around for decades. It has proven to compound assets for decades. Crypto is not there yet. It's been around for a couple decades, but you can't have 50 to 60% drawdowns on a whim and expect the retail investor to have a positive result. We are trained to buy high and sell low, right? That is a problem, and that will be the results if this is in the portfolio. You don't have to go back far. You go back to 2022 and look at the performance of the average retail investor. JP Morgan quotes it at 39%. Negative 39% return. S&P was only down about 20, right? So you had 2x the downside, and that's because it's an emotional exercise, and people want to buy high and sell low. And if you have an institutional portfolio management team that's designing and layering in the alternatives, even if it were to be Bitcoin, right? Say Bitcoin does get through the approval process in Washington, and it does go into a target date fund, it's going to be in there at a very small allocation, right? They're going to have it in there at a 2 or 3% max allocation. That's a completely different exercise than letting a 22-year-old put their full 22K, which 100% will happen. Put their full 401k allocation into Bitcoin. That's we just don't want to see that happen. That's not what it's designed to do. So I would probably press pause there. And same thing on the annuities, Nick. We can talk a little bit about that, but generally speaking, this is not a place for annuities. We're not huge fans of annuities, and I'll just kick it over to you, Nick, to take us down that road a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's been the most recent proposal that's been getting kicked around in DC, which is potentially adding annuities to the 401k plan. This is being pitched as a way to secure lifetime income off of someone's retirement assets. It's obviously being lobbied for pretty hardly by the insurance companies. And listen, for certain folks, depending on how that fits into your entire financial picture, that may not be the worst thing by having guaranteed income stream for life. But there's the same set of issues that face a traditional annuity face this one, right? Which is you're addressing that longevity risk potentially, but you're really locking yourself into, you're reducing your options and the flexibility that you have in retirement. So what those are kind of my 2 cents on it, I guess, is that it sounds great. It's a very sellable idea. To someone, it's almost like it's like what a pension used to be. You get your income stream for life, but there's ways to do that without necessarily locking that money up into that type of vehicle, right?
Yeah, I think you're paying for the fees are incredibly high on annuities, and what you're doing is you're paying for the emotional support that you don't really need, where they're claiming to protect the downside and give you the guarantee. But in reality, if you look at a multi-asset portfolio that's properly designed, whether it be a target date fund that is properly designed because there's an institutional quality money manager designing it with a huge team behind them, if you look at it over any reasonable time frame, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, they always deliver positive results, right? I'm not saying, go all into one subsector of the stock market and claim that that's always going to deliver positive results. But what we can hang our hat on for sure is that annuities are incredibly expensive. Okay. So when we're in a 401k, one of the biggest things that we have in our corner is time, right? And then you're also buying every 2 weeks when a paycheck comes in. So if the stock market goes down a little bit, you're buying additional shares. And somebody may say, well, yeah, I'm going to do this at the end of my career. Even at the end of your career, you're still buying along the way. And the target date funds are going to cheat you towards bonds at that point in time anyways. And bonds, generally speaking, almost always deliver positive results as long as you give them a little bit of time, right? And 2022 was an exception. But generally speaking, bonds have delivered terrific returns, and you don't have to pay an arm and a leg for them. You're going to see the fees associated with annuities is comparable to the fees associated with private equity. Private equity delivers 12, if you go back and you look at history, has delivered 12.5% return per year. Okay, going back decades. An annuity is going to get you, a third of that. So you're paying somebody, 2 to 3% per year for, what is a 5% return, and just that is a poor use of a 401k. What we should be doing is embracing diversification, embrace the target date. And if you're not a target date fan, at least get yourself a properly diversified portfolio, including U.S. stocks, non-U.S. stocks, and bonds. And you're buying every 2 weeks. Be willing to have a little bit of volatility in the portfolio and avoid, if annuities do end up in there, avoid them. We are not fans. The fees are incredibly high. And as a fiduciary, we do not see many scenarios where it makes any sense to put somebody in an annuity. And I know that's kind of a blanket statement, and we're not allowed to make those. So obviously, to each person, they got to look at their situation. But at Life Goals, not one person has been put into an annuity, and there's across hundreds of families, and folks are very happy with the results. And there's been some bumpiness in the markets over the last few years to test drive it. So embrace the longevity, embrace the concept where you're buying every 2 weeks into this, and avoid the fees.
So looking at continued evolution of kind of some legislation that's coming down the pike here, the administration floated out the idea of penalty-free 401k withdrawals for down payments and closing costs just last month, which I think is a little bit of window dressing here for the administration and the Republicans. They want to make sure that they're at least looking to be addressing the affordability crisis that's going on in the United States in regard to housing. But let's say it does gain some momentum and get pushed through. What are your thoughts on someone taking money from their 401k and putting it down on a house?
Yeah, so you do have to give the Trump administration a pat on the back for literally throwing the kitchen sink at everything, right? They're trying, right? Doesn't mean it's going to be the best idea. I can tell you that if you unlock the trillions of dollars in 401ks and allow that to then go purchase homes, it's not going to make homes cheaper, right? The price of homes is a supply and demand issue, like every other asset on the planet, and the supply is really the problem here, which is a really hard fix, right? It's not easy to make the economics of building homes easier, and that's where the supply is going to come from, right? So the supply side is not going to improve. So if you cut loose a bunch of cash from 401ks, it's just going to drive up home prices. But it's an idea that's worth kicking around, and if they put some guardrails on it, potentially there's a way that it can be set up where it makes sense. Potentially, the Roth piece of it could be utilized, or maybe they say, hey, the 401k, you could use a percentage of the 401k if the 401k is over X dollar amount. And, we start walking a fine line there when we start telling people how they can spend their money. And you debate whether or not it makes sense, and nobody wants to be overregulated. But if you're going to allow people to pull money out and go ahead and push it towards a home, I would just caution the home buyer, especially young people. I was actually cautioned early in my career, and so was Taylor. Taylor was actually shipped out to Indianapolis, Indiana for his career, and he was paid a lot of money when he was out there. And our management teams at that point in time, I was shipped to New York City. I was in Midtown, and we were making a really healthy living when we were very young. And our management team specifically said to us, do not buy a house. I know you can afford to buy a house. Do not buy a house. The reason why is because life is going to change, right? You're going to get married. You may have a kid. All these things could lead you to a different city, to a different state. Your job is going to change. All these different variables can change. If you then took your money and tied it up into a home, that home is not liquid, right? And you can say, oh yeah, real estate is liquid. Just put it on the market and sell it. As soon as you put something on the market, you have your heart set on a price X, and if the bidder is coming in $50,000 under your price, your liquidity is gone, right? Until you're going to come down and meet that price. So there is no liquidity on real estate in reality. It's not quick anyways, unless you're just gonna accept a low offer, which you can always do that, but nobody's going to do that because that doesn't make a lot of sense. So if they put guardrails on it, it's a maybe, but it's definitely not going to make it's not going to solve the home affordability challenge. It's going to do nothing other than push house prices up, and also go back to the start of this conversation, which was the average American only has $100,000 in their retirement. We need to embrace the 401k system. Let the thing be. Don't look at it, dollar cost average into it, max the baby out, let it grow. Don't touch it for decades, and you'll be absolutely set up when it comes time to retirement. But if we keep messing around with it and figuring out different ways to actively manage it, or pull money out of it, or take loans against it, or do things that could potentially harm it, it's a step in the wrong direction. So I would say that the administration has an uphill battle with that, and that's probably why they walked it back a little bit. But yeah, it's a creative thought nonetheless.
It is. I think it's action is better than no action, at least politically speaking. But again, I think there would be a massive opportunity cost from the loss of compounding that you're gonna experience by having that massive withdrawal early on in your career. But again, individual circumstances, it may make sense, but generally speaking, not sure that's going to be the right decision for most people. And we'll see if that continues to move forward.
So in conclusion, what we're recommending is go back to your 401k platform, right? Go online, log in, make sure that you know what you're invested in, right? And if you don't have a really great answer as to why your investment allocation is what it is, embrace the target date. You're going to get professional money management there. There's a professional institutional money asset manager that's designed that portfolio, and that will keep you 100% invested, and you will not have to mess with it, right? As they say, keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple, stupid. So we definitely recommend that. Also, look at your mix, whether you have a combination of Roth and traditional 401k. The younger you are and the less money you make, you may want to lean towards the Roth. As you get later into your career and you're making a lot more money, it probably makes sense to go 100% into the traditional. And then as you start to see these new evolutions to the 401k come out, whether it's private equity, Bitcoin, or the potential to pull money out of the 401k and spend it on a home down payment, generally speaking, we would recommend leaving the money where it is. Let the money compound for you, right? These 401ks have been very successful wealth generation machines for decades now. They work great if people leave them alone and dollar cost average into them every 2 weeks and max them out if they can. As these new things come up, go slowly. Don't go all into anything. And then if there's a home buying opportunity that presents itself, just press pause, speak with your loved ones, speak with a trusted friend that you think has an understanding of the financial system, or potentially even your financial advisor, and just make sure you're making a calculated decision, not only on the home purchase and how it's going to impact your 401k, but also, are you going to be living in that location long term? And if you're not, definitely don't do it. So thank you all, and we will look forward to chatting with you again next week.
Quick ask. If you're enjoying the show, hit the follow and drop a rating. It helps more folks find our podcast. Thanks so much.
The information discussed in this video is for educational purposes only and should not be considered investment, tax, or financial advice. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. Always consult a qualified financial professional before making any investment decisions. Past performance is not indicative of future results.